There was a place in every black neighborhood that was more than what it appeared to be. From the outside, it looked simple enough. A striped pole spinning red, white, and blue. A plate glass window with a name painted in gold or black letters. Maybe a few chairs visible through the glass, occupied by men in various stages of getting trimmed, shaped, and cleaned up. But if you grew up black in America during the 1950s, 1960s, or 1970s, you knew that the barbershop was sacred ground. It was church without the sermon. It was school without the books. It was therapy without the couch. And for little black boys sitting in those chairs for the first time, it was an initiation into manhood that no classroom could ever provide. This is the story of the black barbershop. The story of the men who ran them, the communities they served, and the children whose lives were shaped by every visit. If you remember the sound of clippers buzzing, the smell of Barbicide and aftershave, and the feeling of that cape being snapped around your neck, then this story belongs to you. The black barbershop in America has roots that stretch back further than most people realize. During slavery, certain enslaved men were designated as barbers, responsible for grooming both enslaved people and, in some cases, their enslavers. After emancipation, barbering became one of the few trades open to black men seeking economic independence. By the late 1800s, black-owned barbershops had become fixtures in African-American communities across the country. They were businesses, yes, but they were also gathering places, sanctuaries, and symbols of black self-determination. In the segregated South and the crowded urban neighborhoods of the North, the barbershop served a function that went far beyond haircuts. When black men could not enter white-owned businesses, when they were turned away from lunch counters in department stores, the barbershop welcomed them. It was one of the few places where a black man could sit down, be treated with respect, and speak his mind without fear. The barbershop was freedom, even when freedom was hard to find anywhere else. For children growing up in black neighborhoods during the 1960s and 1970s, the barbershop was a mysterious and fascinating place. Little boys would walk past and peer through the window, watching the men inside laugh and talk and gesture with their hands. The energy was different from anywhere else. It was loud but not chaotic. It was serious but filled with laughter. It was a place where grown men gathered and every boy wanted to be old enough to belong. The first trip to the barbershop was a milestone. Maybe you were 4 or 5 years old, holding your father's hand as you walked through that door for the first time. The smell hit you immediately. It was a mixture of hair tonics, aftershave, disinfectant, and something else you could not quite name. The floor was covered in hair clippings that had not yet been swept. The radio played soul music or news or a baseball game, depending on the day. And every eye in the place turned to look at you, the new little man who had come to get his first real haircut. The barber himself was a figure of respect and authority. He wore a clean white smock or a button-down shirt. His own hair was always perfect, a walking advertisement for his skills. He had strong hands that moved with precision, guiding the clippers along the edges of hairlines, shaping fades with an artist's eye. The barber knew things. He knew who was hiring and who was firing. He knew whose marriage was struggling and whose son had made the honor roll. He knew the neighborhood gossip and the national news, and he could speak on both with equal authority. For little boys in that chair, the barber was an authority figure unlike any other. He was not a parent, not a teacher, not a preacher. He was something else entirely. He was a man who commanded respect through skill and presence, who talked to you like you mattered, who asked about school and sports and your plans for the future. In those 15 or 20 minutes in his chair, you felt like someone important. You felt like a man in training. The barbershop had its own rhythm, its own rules, its own culture. If you did not know the rules, you learned them quickly. First, you waited your turn. It did not matter if you had somewhere to be. It did not matter if your mother was waiting outside in the car. When you walked into the barbershop, you found a seat along the wall and you waited. The men who arrived before you got served before you. That was the law. While you waited, you listened. The conversations in the barbershop were like nothing you heard anywhere else. Men talked about politics with a frankness that would have gotten them in trouble in mixed company. They debated sports with a passion that bordered on religious fervor. They told jokes that made the whole shop erupt in laughter. Jokes that your mother definitely would not have approved of. And sometimes they talked about serious things, about jobs lost and bills unpaid, about sons in trouble and daughters doing well, about racism and resistance and what it meant to be a black man in America. For young boys sitting in those waiting chairs, these conversations were an education. You learned how men talked to each other, how they argued without fighting, how they supported each other through troubles without getting too emotional about it. You learned the art of signifying, that playful verbal sparring that could escalate in an instant or diffuse just as quickly. You learned that a man could be strong and vulnerable at the same time, that asking for help was not weakness. That community was the source of survival. The barbershop was also where you learned about style. The posters on the wall showed the latest haircuts, each one with a name and a number. The afro in its various heights and shapes. The fade with its gradient from skin to hair. The part, the shag, the process for those who wanted their hair straightened and waved. Fashion changed, and the barbershop was where you learned what was current. A boy might walk in asking for whatever his father had, but by the time he was a teenager, he had his own style, his own identity, shaped in part by the conversations and choices made in that chair. The tools of the barbershop were objects of fascination for young boys. The clippers, heavy and chrome, with different attachments for different lengths. The straight razor, stropped on leather until it was sharp enough to shave without pulling. The hot towels that came out steaming and were wrapped around faces to soften beards and open pores. The talcum powder that was brushed on necks with a soft, bristled brush. The Barbicide jar with combs soaking in blue liquid. Each tool had a purpose, each motion had a meaning, and watching the barber work was like watching a craftsman practice an ancient art. The cape was part of the ritual too. That striped cloth that was snapped around your neck and fastened with a clip in the back. The cape transformed you. When you sat in that chair and the cape went on, you were no longer just a kid. You were a customer. You were someone receiving a service, someone whose appearance mattered, someone worthy of time and attention. The cape made you sit up straighter, it made you hold still. It made you feel like a man. Saturdays were the busiest days at the barbershop. That was when working men had time off, when fathers brought their sons, when the shop was filled from open to close. The wait could be hours long, but nobody minded too much. Saturday at the barbershop was a social event. Men would come early and stay late, even after their haircuts were done, just to be part of the conversation. Dominoes might be played in the corner. Card games might break out. Someone might run to the corner store for sodas and snacks. The day stretched on, unhurried and full. For boys, Saturday at the barbershop was a chance to be surrounded by men. In many households, fathers worked long hours or were absent entirely. The barbershop provided male role models, older brothers and uncles and neighbors who showed what manhood could look like. These were men who worked hard, who took care of their families, who carried themselves with dignity. Watching them, listening to them, being acknowledged by them, all of this shaped young boys in ways that are hard to measure but impossible to forget. The barbershop was also a place of entrepreneurship and economic independence. In a world that denied black men so many opportunities, owning a barbershop was a path to self-determination. A man who could cut hair could always make a living. He was not dependent on white employers who might fire him for any reason or no reason. He was not subject to the indignities of the factory floor or the service industry. He was his own boss, serving his own community, building wealth that could be passed down to the next generation. Many of the most successful black businessmen in American history started in barbershops or were supported by the barbershop economy. The shop was a place where business deals were made, where investments were discussed, where young men received advice about starting their own ventures. The barber was often one of the wealthiest men in the neighborhood, not because he charged high prices, but because he was consistent, reliable, and respected. His success was proof that black enterprise could thrive even under the most challenging circumstances. The conversations in the barbershop covered every topic imaginable, but some subjects came up more than others. Sports was always a favorite. The achievements of black athletes were celebrated with particular pride. When Muhammad Ali won a fight, the barbershop erupted. When Hank Aaron was chasing Babe Ruth's home run record, every at-bat was discussed and analyzed. When the local high school team won the championship, the barbershop knew every player by name and every play by heart. But the conversations went deeper than sports. The barbershop was where the civil rights movement was debated, supported, and sometimes criticized. Men discussed Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, argued about tactics and strategies, shared news from the front lines of the struggle. When cities burned in the riots of the 1960s, the barbershop tried to make sense of the chaos. When leaders were assassinated, the barbershop mourned. The shop was a space for processing the trauma of being black in America, for finding solidarity and strength in shared experience. For young boys, these conversations were confusing and enlightening in equal measure. You might not understand everything the grown folks were talking about, but you absorbed the tone, the passion, the seriousness. You learned that the world was complicated, that being black meant carrying burdens that other people did not have to carry. But you also learned that you were not alone. You learned that there was a community of men who had your back, who understood what you were going through, who had survived and thrived despite everything. The barbershop also taught lessons about respect. Respect for elders, respect for the barber, respect for yourself. A boy who talked back to a grown man in the barbershop would be corrected, not just by his own father, but by every man in the room. The shop enforced standards of behavior that extended beyond its walls. A young man who acted right in the barbershop was expected to act right everywhere else. The community was watching, and the community held you accountable. The sensory experience of the barbershop is something that stays with you forever. The sound of clippers buzzing, changing pitch as they moved from thick hair to thin edges. The snip of scissors trimming around the ears. The slap of aftershave on freshly shaved skin. The hiss of the hot towel machine. The creak of the barber chair as it was pumped up or lowered down. These sounds created a symphony that was unique to the shop, a soundtrack of masculinity and community. The smells were equally distinctive. The chemical sharpness of Barbicide, the sweetness of hair oils and pomades, the clean bite of aftershave, whether it was Clubman or Pinot or something else entirely. The faint mustiness of the building itself, old wood and worn linoleum and years of history embedded in the walls. When you walked into a barbershop, you were walking into a specific place with a specific identity, different from anywhere else in the world. The barbershop was a place of transformation. A boy walked in with a head full of uncombed hair and walked out looking sharp, clean, ready for whatever came next. The transformation was physical, but it was also psychological. Getting a fresh haircut boosted confidence. It made you feel put together, respected, worthy of attention. Young men understood this intuitively. A fresh cut before the first day of school, before a job interview, before a date, was not vanity. It was preparation. It was armor. The barber was the agent of this transformation, and he took the responsibility seriously. A good barber did not just cut hair. He assessed what each client needed, taking into account face shape, hair texture, personal style, and occasion. He made suggestions but respected preferences. He worked with care and precision, knowing that his work would be visible to the world. A bad haircut was not just a professional failure, it was a personal embarrassment for the client who had to wear it. The barber's reputation depended on every single head that left his chair. The relationships built in the barbershop lasted for years, sometimes for generations. A man might go to the same barber for decades, watching him age, sharing life's milestones, trusting no one else with his hairline. Sons were brought to their father's barbers, and the cycle continued. These relationships were based on trust, consistency, and shared experience. The barber knew things about his clients that their own families might not know, confidences shared in the chair that went no further. When a longtime barber retired or passed away, the loss was felt throughout the community. Men would gather to share stories, to remember the conversations and the haircuts, to mourn someone who had been part of their lives for so long. A new barber might eventually fill the chair, but the relationship had to be built from scratch. Trust was earned over time, one haircut at a time. The black barbershop was not just a male space. Women were present too, though in different roles. The barber's wife might manage the books or work the front desk. Mothers brought their young sons for haircuts, waiting patiently while the men talked. Girlfriends and wives might stop by to pick up their partners, lingering briefly before pulling them away. But the core of the barbershop remained masculine, a space where men could be themselves in ways that might not be possible elsewhere. This created a unique dynamic. The barbershop was a place where masculinity was performed, reinforced, and sometimes challenged. Men talked about what it meant to be a man, about responsibilities and failures, about strength and vulnerability. The conversations could be crude at times, full of bravado and posturing, but they could also be tender, supportive, honest in ways that men were not always permitted to be in other settings. By the 1980s and 1990s, the black barbershop was evolving. New styles demanded new techniques. Hip-hop culture brought fresh aesthetics, intricate designs carved into fades, logos, and patterns that required artistic skill. The barbershop remained a community hub, but the clientele was changing, the music was changing, the conversations were changing. What remained constant was the fundamental purpose. The barbershop was still a place where black men gathered, where community was built, where young boys learned what it meant to grow up. Today, black barbershops continue to thrive in neighborhoods across America. They have adapted to new times while maintaining old traditions. The conversations now include social media and streaming, politics that would have been unimaginable 50 years ago, sports teams and athletes that carry forward the legacy of those who came before. But the essence remains. The barbershop is still sacred ground.